Welcome, students. This video is about reproductive strategies, sexual selection. This topic is quite large. It's one of my favorite topics. I focused on this during my research in grad school. And so we're going to give it a look. I will move to our PowerPoint slide a minute. And here we are, reproductive strategies. The material that we're reading is from Mother Nature, and there's several selections, all right? Well, it turns out that when we think about reproduction in animals, all sorts of questions can come to mind, right? Maybe things like, why do males put so much effort into elaborate courtship displays and elaborate courtship visual, like physical features? Why do males and females, why are they sexually dimorphic? Why do males compete with each other so much? Well, Darwin was interested in these questions too. He posited a type of selection called sexual selection that helps to explain some of the strange behaviors we see in males and females in their courtship. So we're going to take a look at those today. This is a nice cartoon that kind of gets at female choice, or one type of sexual selection. So this little bird's like, hey, you want to go out? No, I'm only into ovals with screaming neon mouths. There are some birds that put on such elaborately weird displays where they've got a ring of feathers above their head, and they open up those feathers and you get this big iridescent blue blue circle around their mouths. They're crazy. So we're going to take a look at what is sexual selection. So let's start there. Okay, sexual selection is a form of natural selection. It's actually a subset of natural selection, so it works in the same way. We have to step back and remember natural selection a minute. Remember that natural selection is one mechanism of evolution, so it can lead to evolution in populations. And it went something like this. Individuals with traits that give them a higher chance of surviving or reproducing will produce more offspring than individuals that don't have that trait. And because they produce more offspring with individuals who don't have that trait, that trait is going to become more and more common in the population over time. And populations will be well adapted to their local environmental conditions or their local conditions, because more and more individuals have that particular trait that allows them to survive or reproduce well, right? And so we get adaptation in the population, and we have evolution of the population. There are some assumptions of natural selection, and these are ones that we learned earlier in the semester. One is that there has to be phenotypic variation. Everyone can't look exactly the same if there's going to be selection for one particular trait. Heritability of the trait. The trait has to have a genetic component to it. And there has to be differential reproductive success. Some individuals doing better than other individuals in the population with respect to how many offspring they produce, how many successful offspring they produce. Okay, so sexual selection is kind of a subset of natural selection. Well, what is it then? Sexual selection is selection for traits that are only concerned with increasing mating success. So we're not dealing with traits that deal with survival, but just mating success. So it's things like obtaining more mates, obtaining better mates, having more successful offspring. Traits that will enhance those things are going to be selected for over time. So sexual selection is going to preserve traits that increase in animals' mating success. Okay? This often opposes natural selection. So natural selection and sexual selection often kind of butt heads or oppose each other. because a trait that might be really important for sexual selection might not be very good at keeping the animal alive. Can you think of an example in which selection for survivorship and selection for mating success oppose each other? Think about the cute little three-spined stickleback the male turns bright red during the breeding season, and he courts females, right, by doing this elaborate dance with his bright red body. The brighter the better. The more vigorous your dance, the better, the more likely you are to get a mate. But what does it mean for predation? Chances are being brighter red, doing more vigorous courtship dances, puts you at higher risk for predation. So natural selection may act to kind of dull, courtship vigor or dull red body coloration, while sexual selection is acting to select for these traits. So natural and sexual selection are in opposition to each other. Both can lead to the evolution of traits, or the evolution in population. Okay? Here are some examples of some of these really elaborate, colorful displays in a couple of animals here: a frigate bird, the peacock, and our beautiful blue tang. And these colors and these displays that go with these colors are attractive to potential mates, but again, could be also there could be predators catching those signals unintentionally, right? Okay, so what we know is that sexual selection acts differently on the sexes. And here I want to make a comment. When we talk about animal sexes, we use the term sex, not gender. Sex refers to their biological state. Okay, males and females. And sometimes hermaphrodites, depending on the species. Okay, so males and females maximize their mating success and their reproductive success differently. And because they do that, they respond to sexual selection differently. What we find is that males maximize their mating success by obtaining more mates. Females maximize their mating success by obtaining better mates. Males that can contribute genetically better genes, or are better parents, for example. So we see what we see as we look at sexual selection, what has emerged is it's acted differently on male and female traits. Males tend to try to maximize the number of matings they get. Females more often the quality of males that they mate with. Why? Why are there differences? Think about parental investment. Do males and females differ in their parental investment? And to think about that, we have to go all the way back to the gametes. Males contribute sperm, right? Their gametes are super cheap. They're energetically cheap. They're small. Males can make many, many, many of them very easily. Females, on the other hand, make eggs. Eggs are very expensive to produce. They make relatively few of them. They're very large in size. So we get a distinction in who's putting in more investment right off the bat. Females are putting in the big egg. Males are putting in the small, cheap sperm. Okay? And then on top of that, difference in gamete size and energy, there are also differences in parental investment, such as in the growth and care of the embryo. So if, for example, you're a mammal, female provides exceptional care, gestation, right? Females tend to provide more of the care during the growth of the embryo. It's not always true. In birds, for example, sometimes males and females incubate the eggs, but heavier on females. Care after hatching or after birth, well, female mammals definitely put in more care after birth, because they lactate, right? And then sometimes provide a lot more care after lactation ends. Females tend to put in more in parental investment. So how does that influence sexual selection? Okay, so here's this weird drawing, and we're just going to try to see if this makes any sense. Okay, there are then, because of the differences in parental investment, there are behavioral differences that show up. So males are producing lots of cheap, small, mobile gametes, super easy to make, a dime a dozen. And they need to compete for access to females. Females are the limiting resource here because, why be choosy about your partner? If your partner doesn't reproduce successfully, who really cares? You lose just a little bit of sperm, and it's cheap. So males tend to not be choosy about their partners because the cost of failure is really small. They don't worry about losing a little bit of sperm. And so for males, being successful in mating means mating with a lot of partners and getting your sperm to a lot of females, right? Obtaining access to a lot of those good gametes. Not being choosy, but not being selective or choosy about your partners just means getting a lot of them. On the other hand, females invest a lot more in parenting. So they produce these really large, expensive eggs, right? And it costs a lot to fail. Each egg represents a significant investment. You don't want to waste your eggs. So obtaining more males or more mates doesn't really help your reproductive success. Obtaining better mates helps your reproductive success. So females attempt to find better mates who might provide better genes or better resources or take better care of their young, etc. So females are going to be choosy about their partners. Now, occasionally, males can fall in this category as well. An example of females being choosy would be one that's shown in our Mother Nature text. Remember, this is our big bad Mother Nature text, if you can see me holding it up here. On page 37, 38, there's some descriptions of female peahens, peacocks, right, that prefer to mate with males that have more eye spots on their large tail feathers. And so we might ask why. Well, they're choosy. We then have to figure out why, and we'll do that in the next couple of lectures. So then 2 forms of sexual selection have emerged. One is called intrasexual selection. Intra means within sex. So we're dealing with members of the same sex. Competition between members of one sex to mate with members of the opposite sex. So typically here we've got males competing with each other for access to females. And we usually see male-male competition is more intense than female-female competition. Because again, most of the time females are the limiting resource. Males aren't choosy, they need to mate with as many females as possible. So there's competition to mate. So we're going to look for traits that enhance males' ability to mate successfully. Okay, those are going to be selected for by intrasexual selection. Intersexual selection is the other. Discrimination by one sex between potential mates of the opposite sex. Being choosy, being selective, or mate choice is what we call intersexual selection. Our textbook focuses on female choice. Our textbook, Mother Nature, focuses on a lot on intersexual selection and specifically on female mate choice. And typically females are the choosier sex. All right? Males sometimes exercise mate choice as well, especially if they put a lot into provisioning of their young. And I'm going to turn this off. Sorry about that. And let's see. Oh, and so now we're ready to get started looking at intrasexual selection or competition for mates. We'll do that in the next video.